Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope you're all doing well. This video is about the explanation of the major assignment number 4, part 1. So the part 1 of this assignment is entirely based on the raw data. By raw data, I'm referring to the fact that at this point of time, I'm not asking about any statistics related to your data or any other analysis techniques. For this part of the assignment, I just want you to gather the data that you're supposed to gather from your respondents, the companies, employees, customers, whatever kind of respondents that you have for your study, or if you're going for the secondary data, which is obtained through annual reports, website, etc. So at this point of time, you just have to submit that raw data with me, the file for it. It could either be in the form of Word file or Excel sheet. So let's begin by explanation. So you need to collect the data for your research project. Depending on the nature of your research design, qualitative, quantitative, or mixed methodology, implement the sampling technique you propose in the research design and collect data using a relevant data collection method. So if you look into this whole statement, this is something that you have already done in your third major assignment. You have already defined your research design, you already know your data collection method, your sampling method has already been decided, and also you even know the sample size for your study unless you're doing a qualitative study. So now is the time to implement that whole research design that you have designed for your study, but only collection of the data is what our first part of the assignment is all about. So let's begin with one by one explaining what you're supposed to do. So you need to submit the following through email at is.tayyib@cordon.edu.af. This is not an official email. It's not an official submission, neither this will be part of your final project because this is raw data. This will be the evidence, or I should say the background information that will ultimately form your analysis chapter. So we will be needing the analysis, but this raw data will not be an officially part of your final project. Hence, it will be submitted through the email that I have provided you. Of course, know my email, so it will be better if you submit it in the email threads that I have already developed for each group individually so that I can track them much easy. So for primary data, as you already know, this is the kind of data that you're originally collecting for your study, which means it is not previously out there, but you're actually obtaining it for the sake of your own final project. So number one, the data collection method. When you see in the bracket, I have explained that you need to explain the practical process adopted by your group. Now here, since you already know that this is raw data, so I'm not asking you to fill pages for me. I just want like the exact information that I need to know. So when you're saying about the process, I basically ask you that explain to me how was the data collection process in terms of your final project. So if it was questionnaire, was it structured questionnaire? Was it shared through email? Was it like physically distributed, or you have used a Google form for that kind of data analysis? So that would be the process for it. If it's qualitative students, if you're conducting interviews, of course, your process will also differ. You can mention whether the interview was face-to-face, was it telephonic, did you use any other application, including Zoom, WhatsApp call, whatever. So just describe to me the process of your data collection, fine. Point number two is number of respondents. I don't need any explanations, just mention how many respondents do you have. Why do I not need explanation for this part is because you have already defined it in the research methodology. So all I have to do is to just remind myself, or it will be a good reminder that how many people have you gathered the data from, fine. So this is point number two, just in the form of numbers, and that's it. Point number three, name a number of variables if quantitative. So whenever I'm asking if quantitative or if qualitative within brackets, strictly follow that. Because if your study is qualitative, so then you have to completely ignore this point number three. But if your study is quantitative, so then you of course will be having some variables. You will definitely have an independent variable and then a number of a dependent variable and a number of independent variables. So just name them. and write down which one is the dependent and which one is the independent variable. But if you're a qualitative student, you're conducting interviews, so then of course point number 3 will be irrelevant. So just avoid that part. That will not be necessary for your assignment. Point number 4, that is the list of questions asked from the respondents. Now, this applies both on qualitative and qualitative students because, of course, when you're conducting data or collecting data, you will be using some sort of questions. So if it's a quantitative study, you need to provide your questionnaire. And if it's a qualitative study, so then you have to provide me the interview questions. That's a must, okay? Then we have point number 5, that is the data file. Now, a lot of the students are completely, confused about what do I mean by data file. Some of the students are also ask me that how can they submit an Excel sheet for their qualitative data. So then I have to clarify that within the brackets, I have specifically mentioned that if your study is quantitative, so then you have to develop an Excel sheet. Now here I would like to give you some information. See, for the data, uh, those who have quantitative data, those who are collecting information through questionnaire, so then you have to, develop an Excel sheet. So in the Excel sheet, remember that each row represents the number of respondents, and then each column represents the question numbers. Now, let's say you have like around whatever number of respondents you have, those number of rows you will be having. So each row will mean that you have one separate respondent, and the same respondent, whatever their response would be for the question number 1, question number 2, and so on, that will be considered column wise. So if you follow this direction, that will be much easier for you to transfer this data into SPSS. So make sure that you follow this direction, because this is something that you will be doing in the SPSS as well. So remember, the respondent will be in the row form, and whatever questions that you have in your questionnaire, that will be in the column form. So make sure you follow that. Then we have data file for the qualitative students. Now for you guys, of course, you cannot do that much of writing within Excel sheet. That's impossible, right? Or plus I would say that would be disorganized. Hence, for you guys, you need to be having a Word file. Now remember, when you are conducting interviews, so when you're asking questions from your respondents, first of all, you need to ask them for permission whether they will allow you to record that whole interview. So because this is very good for you in order to remember, because of course at the end of the day, if you keep writing it on the spot, there is possibility that you might skip some part. Hence, you will be asking them to allow you for recording. So then you can use any other gadget or your mobile phones, put the recorder on, and whatever questions that you ask, they will answer, so everything will be recorded. So later on, once you listen to the recording, then you have to write every word that the person says for each of the question. So for example, you will start or open a Word file, you will write respondent number 1. For the question number 1, what did respondent number 1 said? So write down the entire answer. Then for the question number 2, what did the respondent 1 said? So like that, you can do it. Of course, it will be like too many Word file pages, but that's absolutely fine, because this is what a qualitative data will look like. It will be more explanatory. It will be completely narrative. It will have a lot of explanations, unlike the quantitative students who are just dealing with numbers, right? So if it exceeds like 10, 12, even 20 pages, that's absolutely fine, and you have to go on with whatever amount of information that you're gathering from your respondents. In fact, the more the data, the richer will be the source of information. Now for you guys, again, like I said, you have to use a Word file. But here, some students might ask that, what if the person does not agree to let you record, which would happen sometimes. So then in that case, you have to go like, because you guys are lucky that you're working in a group, so one of you should be asking the question and second person should be writing it down. So you have to go with your group member. because the same person who's asking question, that will be impossible to write down as well. So one person can carry on the whole interview session, but the other person will try to note down as much as possible. In fact, if you take your laptops, people who are good in typing, I'm sure they will not skip a lot of information. Thirdly, like another student today came, that what if the we send the interview questions to the respondents through email, etc., and then they write their response and send it back. So then you cannot call that an interview, of course, right? Because you do understand that interview is a one-to-one interactive session. So if that's the case, there is no wrongness in that. You can do that, definitely do that, but then you have to call it questionnaire. That will be an open-ended questionnaire, because then the person that you are sending the questionnaire, those are the combination of all the open-ended questions that they are going to answer or type in the form of like explanations, narrations, etc. So that's also possible, but then do not call it an interview. That will be called an open-ended questionnaire, which will have the same kind of analysis. So if you're wondering how will you analyze that data will also be analyzed using thematic analysis. So there is no problem in analyzing that, or there's no different approach for analyzation of that. Then we have secondary data. Now for those students who are not using questionnaire, neither they're using any interview, in fact their variables or the information that they require is published on some source of some online sources. So then that kind of a data will be called secondary data, right? So here, by the way, we are not referring to literature review at all. Here at this point, I'm referring to the data that you're going to analyze, and ultimately, because literature review is not used for analysis, that's for the supporting material of your study. However, the secondary data that here we are referring to is the kind of data on which you will run the analysis of your final project. So some of the examples would be like having total assets of a company, or let's say the interest rate, like earning per share. So all of these information, these variables will be used, will be having numerics. So it will be already published. So you cannot say that it's original data collected for your study, because it's already published. All you do is to just acquire it and use it for your own study. Hence you can, of course, you can do secondary data, but then the filing, etc., will be slightly different. So point number one, name a number of variables. So this is for all the quantitative students. For you guys, just name and mention the number of variables that you're using. For example, some students are having FDI, interest rate, things like that. So if you're obtaining that information from a secondary source, so then you'll be using secondary data. So just name and provide the number of the variables. Then we have source of data collection. Now this is something that we did not use, or did I not ask it from the in the primary data, because that was originally collected. But for the secondary data, the source will be either it will be from annual reports, either it will be on a website, stock exchange, markets, etc. So that would be the source of information. Fine. Then we have years under observation. Now for those students who have the current data, which is called cross-sectional, so then you don't have to, you just mention the current year, right? So it's because it's 2021. So then you mention that it is just for the current year, and that's a cross-sectional data. But for those students who are like running a comparative analysis on multiple years, for example, you're collecting information from 2015 up to 2020 or something, so then the year of observation would be 5 years, and then you have to mention from which year to which year, fine? Because 5 years could be any date, right? But when you specify that it's between 2015 to 2020, so then it will be clarified exact years. And that will be time series information. Then we have point number 4, type of data. Now here, when you know the number of, or the years of observation, you have mentioned 1 or 2, 3, depending on that, you will specify whether the data is longitudinal, cross-sectional, or panel, which is the combination of both. So I hope you know the difference, right? Longitudinal is the time series data, which means you will be having multiple years for the same company. Then cross-sectional, we have, same year but multiple companies. And then panel means that it will be different countries, companies, countries, whatever, but for different time intervals. And for you guys, again, the data file would be in the form of Excel sheet because you will be dealing with numbers, numerics. So that's easier to record in an Excel sheet. For you guys, it will be variable wise. Here I explained it to other students of questionnaire, but for you guys, it will be like, this is the name of the variable. Let's say total assets or earning per share. So whatever, and this will be year, let's say this is year 2015. So for the 2015, let's say you have one company. So what was, or for 2015, you can write down that this is, let me guess, a company, whatever, ABC company, right? So whatever's, total assets they had, you will place it here. And then if there is another company, so then you will place it there. But if there is just one company and different year, so then you will write it in front of that, right? So each column will represent a separate variable. Previously, when I explained it for the questionnaire, it was questions of the questionnaire. And how you will define that variable, how will you combine those questions to analyze or measure your variable, that's secondary. You don't have to worry about that right now. I've already recorded videos. You will already know how you can sum up or take the mean of all those questions and then measure every single variable that you have for your study. That's a different story. But for the secondary students, it's already measured. It's already known that this is total assets. So for you guys, any further quantification or measurement is not required. So this is how your data file will look like. So I hope that now you understand what I'm asking from you guys in the first part of assignment. So here, as you can see, in nowhere, I have asked you to provide me any graphs, tables, or any analysis. Just provide me the raw data and the date of submission. This is for the Saturday students. For the Thursday students, you already know the date of submission. So it will be different, so you don't have to freak out. Your date of submission is different from the Saturday students. Okay, so if still there are any questions, you can be specific. Yeah, so if I have to do one quick analysis of what you're supposed to do. Let's assume that some of the students who are using questionnaire, who have quantitative research and they are using questionnaire, fine. So then now I will do a tick mark of which parts you're supposed to provide me. So of course, this point number 1 is applicable for you. You have to mention the data collection method. So if it's questionnaire, explain the process. You can tell me whether it's through Google form, it's through email address or physically distributed. Just mention that, and there's no need of further explanation. Number of respondents, so then you have to tell me whether there are 100 employees, customers, whatever respondents that you have to just provide the number of them. But at the meantime, also mention the characteristic of your respondents, which means instead of writing like you have 105 respondents, just mention that you have 105, let's say, employees, etc., so that I know what or who your respondents are. Then name a number of variables because your study is quantitative. So then you have to mention how many variables do you have, and then you have to mention exactly how many and what are the names of those variables, which one is independent, which one are dependent, etc. The list of questions for you, just interview questions will be applicable. So then you have to provide me the questionnaire. Some of the students have already done that, but then when you submit your raw data, I also have to see your questionnaire again. So you have to attach it alongside. The data file for you guys would be Excel sheet. For those students who are familiar with SPSS, I don't mind. You can submit your SPSS file as well, in which you have fed your data. But then if you're not familiar with it so far or so as yet, so then you have to provide me the Excel sheet for your data. So this is for the students who are having quantitative study and they're using questionnaire, fine. So for you guys, this part of the guideline is completely irrelevant, and you just have to provide all the information كده مقابل شما صوت سهي میبینن درست است. Now for the qualitative students who are using interview شما باید کدام موضوعات به مد نظر بگیرین. So here we have data collection method. Yes, you have to describe this. What is the process? Was it a face-to-face interview? Was it telephonic? Any other medium of exchange, for example, Zoom, WhatsApp, whatever. So you have to mention that. Again, like there, I don't need like full paragraphs of write-up. Just tell me what's your data collection method and then what's the process. That's it. Number of respondents, of course, when you're collecting or conducting interviews, you will be having respondents. So you have to mention number of respondents. So instead of saying like you have like 12 respondents, just tell me you have like 12. Let's say if your study is about women entrepreneurs, so then you have to say that you consider 12 entrepreneurs and you collected information from them. The number of name a number of variables. This is completely irrelevant. It does not apply on your study. So then just avoid it. For the fourth section, you have to provide me your interview questions. This is something which is relevant for you guys. So not only you tell me your data collection method, number of respondents, but you also should attach your interview questions as well, so that I know that what exact question have you asked from your respondents. The data file, of course, yours cannot be Excel sheet. So then you have to provide me a Word file. This is what you have to follow. So the Word file should contain all the information that your respondents have provided. Okay, remember one thing, that you will provide me the Word file, but then make sure when you're transcribing the information, if let's say there are some grammatical issues, there are some unnecessary pauses in the responses of your respondents, so then you have to correct them, right? This is part of the editing of your data. So then you have to mention or you have to fix that issue. If there are a lot of pauses, just pick what they are saying and then write it in a full statement. So here I want, not only I want raw data from you, but then the edited version, which means there shouldn't be any spelling or let's say grammatical issues or any unnecessary pauses, fine, because they will not make any sense. Again, so for you guys, this part will be completely irrelevant. So you just have to ignore it, and you don't even have to write that it's not applicable for your study. Just simply ignore it, fine? Now, for all the students who are using secondary data, for you guys, if it's quantitative, so what you're supposed to do is, okay, here, I don't know how many of students are using secondary information for qualitative. So far, nobody has come to me, so I will not dig into more detail. But if you remember, I did tell you that secondary data can also be in the form of qualitative, right? In which you will be analyzing the annual reports, and instead of taking numbers, you look into the wordings, you look into the narrations, etc., for which you could use like content analysis, etc. But because nobody is using, so I will not dig into more detail. So I will specifically talk about or talk in the context of quantitative students. So first of all, you already know that when you're using secondary information, so this complete part, this complete part, including the previous points, it will be irrelevant. So you have to skip that part because that will not be applicable for you guys. But for the name and number of variables, mention how many variables do you have, what are their names, etc. That's it, just names, no other extra or additional information. Then source of data collection, you will already know whether it's annual report, whether it's website, whether it's their reports that are not published but you have gotten from their offices, etc. So then that would be the source of information. Years under observation, doesn't matter if you don't have many years, even if it's for the current time period, just mention the year of observation. If it's cross-sectional, which means here, so then year of observation, let's say, would be the current year, which is 2021, fine. Let's say if it's longitudinal or cross-sectional, so then you have to mention 2015 to 2021. So just write down like this, no need of explanations. And if it's panel, so then you have to say that there are 30 like say firms, and then the data will be collected for 2015 up to 2021, fine. And then the data file will be Excel sheet, which again I already explained that your variables would be column wise, and your companies or the year could be row wise. So that would be your Excel sheet, and that you have to submit it to me through email address. Okay, for those of the students here, another important issue for those students who are using a mixed methodology, so then of course you know that you will be using both questionnaire and interview. So for each one of them, you have to provide information. So let's say if you're using both questionnaire and interview, so then mention that the data collection method was questionnaire. What was the process for questionnaire? Mention it, whether it was Google form, email, physical, whatever. And if it and within the qualitative part, because it's a mixed methodology, so then you have to mention that it was interview, and was it face to face, telephonic, whatever. Number of respondents, because your data would be mixed methodology, so then you have to mention number of respondents for the questionnaire and the number of respondents for the interview. Name a number of variables, so because it's mixed methodology, you're using quantitative as well, so then mention how many variables do you have, which one is dependent, which one is independent, and that's it. And what are the names of them. List of questions, so then because it will be mixed methodology, so provide me the questionnaire of your study and then interview questions as well. Data file will be both in the Excel sheet form and in the Word file. So this is for all the students who are submitting or who are doing a mixed methodology approach. For you guys, you have to follow the entire guideline. For the secondary data, of course, so far nobody has come to me telling me that they are using mixed methodology using secondary data for both of them. Nobody has come yet. So then again, if you're still doing it, so then you can ask for a separate guideline from me. But because nobody has come to me with secondary information in which they are doing mixed methodology using quantitative and qualitative information both from the secondary data, that's why I'm not going into much detail of it. So this is pretty much what I'm asking you to do for the first part. So my advice would be to fully do the first part first, and without getting yourself into confusion, unless you fix or finish this part, then go and refer to the second part of the assignment, because otherwise it will be slightly confusing for you. And that's the main reason why I have given you deadline for both the parts, because I didn't want you to be unclear of where to start. So right now you already know where to start. That's your data collection, raw data, that's it. You have to send me the Word file or the Excel sheet depending on the nature of your study. Okay, this was it. If you have any questions, please proceed with your questions on either my email address. You can come physically to the university, or you can always use your WhatsApp group. Thank you, everyone. Have a good time.